Throughout NBA history, there are multiple teams that unfortunately become forgotten. And when it comes to the 2000s, there are a plethora of those teams. And one of those teams are the mid to late 2000s Utah Jazz. A team that had a quick rise, but unfortunately had a pretty quick fall as well. And it seems as if a lot of people are not only unaware of why they fell off so quickly, but don't truly understand the full potential that this team possibly could have had. But before I get ahead of myself, let's start off at the beginning. At the end of the 2002-2003 season, the Utah Jazz were coming to a conclusion to one of the greatest duos the NBA has ever seen, and that duo is John Stockton and Karl Malone. A duo that lasted well over 15 years, and at the end of the season, John Stockton decided to call it quits and he headed for retirement, where Karl Malone decided to give it one more shot and, as many of us know, joined the Los Angeles Lakers in hopes to win a championship. Now, what they left behind was a team that had some miscellaneous pieces, but showed a lot of promise. And let's not forget the organization still had Jerry Sloan as a head coach, one of the greatest coaches in NBA history, who has well over 1,000 wins, which is only one of 9 coaches in league history who's been able to do so. And he is a coach that has been labeled as being the mastermind of one of the most commonly used offensive sets in the NBA, which is the pick and roll. But going back to some of the miscellaneous pieces that was left behind after the Karl Malone and John Stockton era, and you have Andre Kirilenko. Andre Kirilenko, or also known as AK-47, which is easily one of the greatest nicknames in NBA history, was a 6'9" small forward who had an amazing 7'4" wingspan. And with that wingspan, he utilized it to be one of the better perimeter defenders within a 5 to 8 year span. And once Karl Malone and John Stockton decided to depart from the organization, he as an individual actually had his best season yet. His scoring output went up, as well as his rebounding and his assist numbers, and was touted as an all-star. And actually in this season, despite them again losing their 2 best players in franchise history, they went on to still have a winning record, but unfortunately that level of success was short-lived, because in the very next season they would go from 42 wins to 26. However, in the summer 2004, the Utah Jazz acquired 2 very pivotal players. The first one is someone I'm pretty sure many of you all are familiar with, and Carlos Boozer. Carlos Boozer at 6'9" was a really solid finisher around the rim, who added a mid-range jumper to his game slowly after he was on the Utah Jazz. At his peak, Carlos Boozer was a 20+ scorer while grabbing 10 rebounds, an all-star and an all-NBA performer, which is rather impressive, especially when you take into consideration that being an all-star in the Western Conference at the forward position when you're competing with players such as Amar'e Stoudemire, Dirk Nowitzki, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett, it's almost unbelievable to think that Carlos Boozer was able to sneak in a few all-star games during this stretch of years. Now, the other acquisition that they had during the summer 2004, and easily one of the most overlooked players during the mid-2000s, was Mehmet Okur. Mehmet Okur during his peak years could give you somewhere around 15 to 18 points while grabbing somewhere around 7 to 9 rebounds. But the one thing that separated Mehmet Okur from a lot of other big men in the NBA is that he was a 7-foot center who could consistently knock down the 3-ball. And no, I'm not talking about the occasional 3-pointer attempt every other game. I'm talking about somebody who consistently was attempting around 3 to 4 3-pointers while shooting around 38%, if not better, from behind the arc. And so by the end of the 2004-2005 season, despite the fact that, again, they only won 26 games, they definitely were building themselves back into an identity that was going to be extremely respectable. With Kirilenko, Carlos Boozer, and Mehmet Okur all on the team, their front court was completely full. Now it was time to go after a backcourt player. And with them being in a lottery, and with some young guards in the upcoming draft class, the Utah Jazz selected Deron Williams in the 2005 draft. Now, what exactly were they getting with Deron Williams? Well, in college, he was a really good passer and facilitator, and he had a 3-point jumper as well. And even though there were some concerns with Deron Williams' game, especially on the defensive end, let's get something straight here, and I'm not even gonna hold you. D Wills could play. We talking about someone who consistently was hitting people with a double crossover hezzy, driving into the lane, kissing the ball at the top of the backboard, falling into the rim while being contested by 2 7-footers. And then he will also hit you with a double crossover jab into an open 3-point shot. And then occasionally some of the passes that he would assist to Boozer. We talking about wrapping the ball to a no look behind the back pass to C Booz, or a double crossover out of the pick and roll, jabbing hard right, passing the ball between the defender leg to C Booz for a nice finish. Trust me when I say D Wills, very early on in his career, he had the sauce. And amazingly enough, it actually worked for the organization pretty quickly, as at the end of the 2005-2006 season, the Utah Jazz had a record of 41-41, and in the very next season, the team actually saw a 10-game improvement, finishing the season with 51 wins. Not only that, the offense was ranked 3rd in the NBA, and defensively, even though they were below average, they still saw some improvements in that department as well. When it comes to Carlos Boozer and Mehmet Okur, both of them were all-stars that year, as well as Carlos Boozer being an all-NBA performer. And when it comes to Deron Williams, despite the fact that many people weren't really high on him, largely because they felt like he was a system player, he still improved rather significantly, as he averaged 16 points and 9 assists on pretty impressive shooting splits as well, especially when you consider that he's only a sophomore. But the most impressive thing about this season is not only that they won 51 games, that they were a top 3 offense, and you saw a massive amount of improvement with their young players, but at the end of the season, they found themselves in the Western Conference Finals. In the conference finals, the Utah Jazz matched up with the San Antonio Spurs, and despite the fact that they did lose in 5 games, it was a standout series for both Carlos Boozer and Deron Williams, as they exceeded expectations and performed extremely well against arguably the best defense in the NBA. And then over the next handful of seasons, the Utah Jazz would see a very similar pattern of success, consistently winning around 45 to 50 games, even in 2009, despite the fact that Carlos Boozer only played 37 games, and up until 2010, they were consistently playoff bound. Unfortunately for them though, in 3 consecutive postseason appearances, they consistently were matching up with the Los Angeles Lakers that were led by both Pau Gasol and Kobe Bryant, and unfortunately were never able to overcome them, which is definitely a shame, because when you take a step back and you recognize it, throughout a 4-year period, the only teams that they were losing to were arguably the 2 best teams in the NBA at that moment, outside of the Boston Celtics when they obviously built their big 3 in 2008. And with Deron Williams and Carlos Boozer continuing to grow as individuals, this should have been a team that should have left a mark in the NBA that lasted longer than just 4 to 5 years. And to even cement that statement, within this 4 to 5 year stretch, they were also adding even more talented pieces to the roster, such as Paul Millsap, Ronnie Brewer, Raja Bell, Kyle Korver, and in the summer of 2010, they drafted Gordon Hayward, as well as signed Al Jefferson also. So with all of that talent, as well as some other players that I didn't name, what exactly happened to this team? Well, for starters, the organization decided to move in a different direction with Carlos Boozer. Carlos Boozer was a free agent in the summer 2010, and the Utah Jazz, despite the fact that they've grown their identity based off of his performance, didn't want to bring him back, largely because of the amount of money that other teams were willing to pay him for. And a huge reason for this is because A, he was starting to become injury prone, especially in 2009 when he went through a surgery that many people believe was going to start to become a reoccurring theme throughout his career, and B, defensively, he was starting to become a liability. And also the organization felt like they had a really good replacement with Paul Millsap, who offensively was not as well rounded as Carlos Boozer at the time, but defensively was definitely an upgrade, and offensively he can still get you around 15 to 17 points. So Boozer was out. Then when it comes to Mehmet Okur, he actually ruptured his Achilles in the first round of the 2010 playoffs and basically was never the same, and eventually was traded off the team as well. Then when it comes to Andre Kirilenko, after the 2010-2011 season, he decided to go back to Russia and play for his home country. And finally, when it comes to other players that I didn't mention, such as Wesley Matthews and Kyle Korver, yes, both of them were on the team at the end of the 2010 season. They decided to just let them walk and sign with other organizations, which is just mind-blowing to me. However, the biggest piece that eventually departed from the organization is Deron Williams, and the reason why he was traded away from the organization is due to a verbal altercation that happened in the middle of the season. While matching up with the Chicago Bulls on February 9th, 2011, Deron Williams decided to disregard a play call from Jerry Sloan. Mind you, at this point, there were allegations that Deron Williams didn't like Jerry Sloan as a head coach, largely because he felt like his talent was being put in a box and the system in which he was playing in was marginalizing his potential. And at halftime during the Chicago Bulls game, Deron Williams was immediately reprimanded by Jerry Sloan. Quote, hey, if you're going to change the play, it would be nice if you let the rest of the team know so we have a chance of scoring. Now, if the conversation ended there, then maybe the outcome would not have been as severe as it was, but unfortunately, by many people's claims, both Deron Williams and Jerry Sloan started to escalate this verbal altercation and got to the point where Jerry Sloan immediately requested a meeting with the Jazz owner after the game. Deron Williams, upon hearing this, allegedly requested to be in that meeting as well, but unfortunately Jerry Sloan wasn't having that and immediately fired back at Deron Williams by stating, "Do you just want me to quit right now?" This stopped everybody in their tracks because at this time, Jerry Sloan was by far and away the longest tenured coach in all of professional sports. The Utah Jazz owner tried to reestablish the pecking order and ranking immediately after the game, stating that, "I wanted to be very clear with one thing. If anything got to the point where we would have to make a choice between a player and you as a head coach, we would side with you 100 times out of 100. Unfortunately, Jerry Sloan's answer really wasn't that optimistic, as he just said, "Well, I don't know how much time I have left in me." Jerry Sloan would go on, sleep on the whole matter, wake up, and literally the next day resign as a head coach from the Utah Jazz. The organization was upset on how the whole ordeal transpired and immediately shopped Deron Williams around multiple teams. And within a 2-week period, the New Jersey Nets actually came with a trade offer that only the Nets themselves could come up with, basically giving away 3 first-round picks, 2011, 2013, and Derek Favors, who just 8 months prior was actually the 3rd overall pick in the 2010 draft class, along with Devin Harris, who just 2 short seasons prior was an all-star for Deron Williams. A trade package that, quite frankly, I don't really blame the Utah Jazz for taking. And just like that, oddly enough, the organization went from contending for a playoff spot for 4 consecutive seasons to being a team that was immediately looking at a rebuild. One of the most oddly disturbing transitions I've ever seen in the NBA. And the reason for this is because if everything worked out, I honestly believe the Utah Jazz had a really solid team. Even if they allowed players such as Carlos Boozer, Wesley Matthews, and Kyle Korver to depart from the organization, and even with Mehmet Okur and Andre Kirilenko no longer being with the team as well, that still could have been a team that featured Deron Williams and Al Jefferson, who both were in their mid-20s, as well as a young Paul Millsap and a young Gordon Hayward. But please let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below. The only reason why I'm doing this video is because somebody actually requested this from me. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the thumbs up, notification bell, and I will see you all next time. Peace.